Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Esoteric Moon Gathering. I'm Dottie Lamoureaux, your host for the summit. And my hope is that you are learning to trust your inner knowing as you're watching these conversations. And if you already have a pretty good relationship with your inner knowing and trust, that you're learning some new things. I'm really excited about the conversation I'm going to have today with Aurora Farber. Her talk is entitled Into the Unknown, Navigating the Mystery and Magic of Life with the Cycles of the Moon. Aurora is a feminine leadership coach, spiritual guide, oracle, writer, speaker, and modern day priestess. She's on a mission to help women step into leadership and ignite their feminine fire, which is the three flames of power, love, and wisdom. She wants that to ignite tripping on my words, the power, love, and wisdom that will ignite a new awakening of evolutionary consciousness and heal our world. She helps women burn away their limiting beliefs, align with their feminine moon rhythm, and embody their passion and mythic purpose in the world. Such a gorgeous mission. Aurora, thank you for being here. I'm so happy to have you.
Oh, thank you, Dottie. It's such a thrill to be here with you, to be here with your audience, and to get to talk about something that I love so much, which is the moon, and well, actually many subjects, the moon, intuition, listening to your soul voice. So I'm really, really delighted to be here.
Oh, excellent. It aligns well. So the title of your talk is Into the Unknown and Navigating the Mystery and Magic of Life with Cycles of the Moon, which I adore. Can you tell us why you chose that title and how attuning to the moon cycle can help us navigate the unknown?
Yes, I'd love to. Well, as a priestess, one of the functions of a priestess is to be empty enough to receive what is meant to be spoken at the time. And so whenever I get an invitation to speak, I say, okay, what is this? What is meant to come through me? And so I feel into the energies of the moment, both in myself and what I'm feeling and in the collective. And so right now we are in a time of really stepping into the unknown. We are in a global pandemic where the structures that we've relied on for a long, long time are starting to crumble. We don't really know the way forward. We're kind of testing out all kinds of different strategies. People have different realities, right? Different unknowns. And then right now, especially now, just in this last week, we're really called to look at the shadows of our culture of racial injustice and navigate our way forward from that, to really look at it, to feel it, to bring it to the heart, and then to decide to create something new. And so that also is a very, very big unknown path. So as human beings, we're not comfortable with the unknown, right? We're not comfortable. We want to see the way, or at least have a flashlight, right? To see what is coming around the bend. And so that's what we've been taught. The more that we know, the more that we can see, the more safe we can feel, the more we can trust in what's ahead. And what I would like to speak about is another path, a feminine path, a mysterious path, and this path that hasn't been taught, this path of stepping into the unknown, but with a different sense, not of, oh, what's out there, what could it be, but with this sense of going within and listening to your intuition, listening to your soul voice, working with your intuition, receiving the signs and symbols that can guide you along the way, and like a path of magic, dancing in the mystery, dancing in the unknown. I love that the beginning of this year, before this all started, I saw the movie Frozen 2, and there's that theme song, Into the Unknown. I don't know if you've seen that, Dottie, but it's a Disney film, and because I am named after a Disney princess, Aurora, I love all the new archetypes of feminine power that are arising in our culture, like Elsa from Frozen. And for anyone who hasn't seen that movie, it's a wonderful way to look at when you hear that call inside of you, when you hear this call and you don't know the way forward, that there is this way in which we can enter and say yes to it and to step joyfully into the unknown. And so that's what I wanted to share about. Also, one of my passions is the moon. And so if you just feel into the energies of the sun and the moon, the sun, the solar that is always shining, that is always giving light, that's the consciousness that we've grown up with, this whole idea to always be on 24/7, 365 days a week. Our calendar, the Gregorian calendar, is a solar calendar based on the earth revolving around the sun. Okay, so our point of reference is outside of ourselves, right? And it's to always be on. Now, the moon is something very different, and it's what we know from an ancient time to feel into not just the sun, but the moon, this moon that revolves around us, that revolves around the earth. So just for the audience, I want you just to feel into the sensation of that, to have something that's revolving around you, that's reflecting the light of the sun to you. For me, that's a deep indication of the power of feeling the support of the planets, feeling the support in the cycle of the moon, to help us amplify our own truth and to ride in the cycle of the moon, which is not like the sun, which is not 24/7. It's 29 and a half. And sometimes it changes like the feminine, right? It's not exact and linear and perfect, right? It's more this spiraling path. And so that moon cycle that not only is 29 and a half days, but it's also a cycle of waxing and waning, a cycle of starting in the dark, starting in the unknown, and then moving into the fullness of the full moon, and then coming back in. This moon cycle rhythm is our birthright. This is encoded not only in the stars, in the moon above, but the moon of our womb. This cycle that's encoded in women's bodies as a natural cycle of manifestation, of gestation, of healing is what I feel. And I feel like this cycle is something that we can tune into in order to kind of come back into balance with a world that has gone so out of control in doing, and also as a guide for us to step into the unknown.
That is so eloquently stated. I love your languaging. It's eloquent and really
Thank you.
beautiful. Yeah. And I never thought about that. The moon revolves around us and we revolve around
Yeah.
the sun.
Isn't that different? Like when you feel into that, wow, something that revolves around us.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really powerful. So how did you come to be fascinated with the moon and follow her?
Well, it's a very interesting story. And as I listen more deeply to my intuition, I discover more. And that's also what I want to offer our audience, is that this journey into the unknown can be so beautiful because it's never ending. And sometimes you find pieces and parts of your story and your truth even after you think that you've finally arrived. That's another way in which we dance in the unknown, rather than focusing on a goal and we get to the destination, to the mountaintop, and say, yes, I've arrived. It's more like, what's next to unfold when we're in that cycle of our own evolution. And so I say this because I just finished writing for a book called Sovereign Unto Herself. And I realized that through the writing process, that it was 8 years ago in 2012, which, for the Mayan calendar had a very important significance. It's also the beginning of the Venus cycle. And we are now at the end of another 8 years. And so we are beginning a new Venus cycle. And as I wrote about my journey, I discovered that my journey over the last 8 years has been to align with my own inner voice, with the divine feminine, and with the moon. And so for me, 8 years ago, I came to a very critical point in my life where I was looking for direction. I was very much in the unknown. I had a health crisis at the time. And my soul called me to listen to an audio about birthing your soul's calling. Well, this led me onto the path of working with my mentor, Elaine Kalila Dowdy, and the 13 Moon Mystery School, which was founded by Ariel Spilsbury. So that was 13 years ago. And that path began to show me a new way of being, because it's truly a path of working with the 13 moons, which is what we have in, our annual cycle. But each moon cycle has an archetype. And so this mystery school is all about receiving the training into these 13 different aspects of the feminine. And for me, some of them, like the Great Mother or the Goddess of Love or the Muse, those were very easy for me. I was like, oh, yes, I know that I can be that, because they're also a little bit more approved of in our society, right? This is the story that I grew up with, the Sleeping Beauty myth of be good and clever and marry the prince, right? That's the story that I received. And yet there were other faces that terrified me, but that intrigued me, like the primal goddess or the liberator or the queen of death, or the wise woman even. These aspects of myself that I wanted to unfold into. And so this path of the 13 moons contains all of those different archetypes to help us really claim our full feminine power, not just the part of us that's palatable, but the part of us that really exists, our wildness as well. And so this gave me an incredible foundation of training, especially during that dark night of the soul. But my true initiation with the moon and my having a real relationship with the moon cycles came a few years later when I faced another dark night of the soul when I discovered I had melanoma. And so that, of course, is a sun cancer. So it's interesting how these breadcrumbs have played out through my life. Sun, moon, right? This sun cancer, for me, who never was a sun worshiper. So I had this on my back, and that became the foundation for the next, one of the books I wrote next in Sacred Body Wisdom, called Voices of the Moonlight. So that was my real initiation into that.
Wow, that's quite a journey.
Yes.
It's interesting that you mentioned 2012, because I was just reading somebody else's information about their journey, and she said in 2012 is when she started to awaken, and I would say the same for me. I started to learn about meditating and taking care of my body with food, and that kind of, it just started to really become very important. So it's interesting. That's a really a turning point for a lot of people.
Yeah, so that's an interesting place for our listeners to kind of look back to, is to 2012, and what were the main themes that they were working through, including the highs and the lows. Often the lows are the impetus for something amazing to emerge.
Yeah, I would say so. That's really fascinating. So you wrote a chapter in Voices in the Moonlight in a book called Sacred Body Wisdom. And can you tell us how writing that chapter helped you create the Moon Cycle Power Path, which is your unique system and blueprint to awakening feminine power?
Yes, I'd love to. So writing for me, whether, it started for me journaling when I was a teenager, and journaling all my angst over wanting love and wanting to be loved, and, just all the weird feelings of being a teenager and growing into myself. And so it's always been a place for me to find my soul voice. And writing for these books in the New Feminine Evolutionary has also been very powerful, because it's a container for something to write that is meant to be a story sharing my own vulnerable path, but that hopefully will inspire others as well. So when I was asked to write for this, I knew right away that I wanted to write about the moon. And because it had happened to me a few years before, it wasn't as vulnerable to me. For a few years after that, I could hardly talk about it without crying, because it was still so raw and so real. But at that moment, it was it was in the past. And so I did what I often do, because I really believe in writing from an ecstatic, embodied place. And so I did this little practice, and I'll share this with our listeners. It's called, I call it DJ Oracle, which is to take your Spotify list and to ask for a message to guide you. And so I took my Spotify list and I played it, and I got the song Stand By Me. So I started dancing around Stand By Me. It's a very nice tune. But then the lyrics came, and it said, "When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light I see, no, I won't be afraid. No, I won't be afraid, just as long as you stand by me." And so in that moment, I was just all in my groove. And then when I heard those words, just as long as you stand by me, I started to cry and I started to break down and I tapped into my own heart. And I felt this rawness of feeling like, but my body didn't stand by me. Like I had done all these things to become healthy starting in 2012. And then, a few years later, this is what happens. And I felt betrayed and angry at my body. And so I began to write about that journey. But what I realized through the writing is that that way in which I felt betrayed, and I began to stack bricks of protection around my heart against my body, right? But this way of stacking up these bricks of protection is something that I had done for my whole life, because I had listened and I had been shaped, even shaping my body according to the voices of the patriarchy, voices that said you're not enough, that you're too much, that you're too sexy, that you're too fat, you're too thin, all of these. And so through my writing, I wrote those voices down as a kind of cleansing to out them once and for all. And then as I sat and thought about my own recovery, I began to write. And I was going to read a little passage from this book, if that's all right.
Yeah.
And how perfect the sun cancer was for my own evolution. So I wrote, still cautious of the sun, I sought sanctuary in nature only at night, and noticed how the moon started as a tiny sliver, grew into fullness, only to shrink back into the darkness once more. Each night I witnessed the shifting cadence. I sensed the emergence of a new feminine wisdom path, the changing moonlight giving me hope of a harmonious, joyful, and feminine way of being. I realized that the disconnection from my body had come from listening to the external voices of a hurried, expectant world with the distorted masculine standards. For years, I had strived to be perfect, bright, and fixed like the sun, following a 24-hour cycle of waking and working and only resting when my body collapsed into sleep at night. The moon phases gave me a new rhythm to follow, a waxing and waning energy that was feminine, cyclical, and regenerative. By following the moon cycle, I began to feel my own energy waxing and waning, lighting up an unexpected, magical inner moon within. This moon of my womb was tied to my menstrual cycle and had been laying a trail of moonlight for me to follow since my teenage years. Intuitively, I knew that reclaiming this inner moon would help me navigate the world on my own terms, illuminating an ancient path to reset, recharge, renew, and reflect each quarter phase while being lovingly held by the magic of the moon. So that is what occurred to me, this knowing through this intense initiation of fear and moving through that fear of cancer. This was the gift that came from the shadow. And so from there, I began to think, well, if I have received all these voices, all these messages, what would I rather have received? Like what would have served me, and what will serve women growing up? What if they had different voices? And so by tapping into the 4 phases of the moon, the new moon, the first quarter moon, the full moon, and the third quarter moon, I listen to the voices of those archetypal energies which correlate new moon mother, first quarter queen, full moon goddess, and third quarter sage, that way in which we go up into the waxing phase and then back in. And so I wrote different vignettes in the voices of those archetypes and what they would have said to me and how that would have made a difference in my life. So for example, I wrote at the new moon, be a mother to your body. Beloved, precious one, you are loved no matter what. I am here for you always, always. In the darkness, there is a new beginning. Feel my arms around you, soothing you, holding you, supporting you. Rest, relax, and be renewed. Forgive the past and begin afresh. Open your intuition and receive my gifts. Plant your heart intentions for this new beginning. Each cycle, a chance of renewal. Each ending, a new beginning. You are precious, beloved. Like a baby I hold in my arms, I will always love you.
I adore that.
Yeah. And so imagine if instead of you're not enough and you're too much, you receive the message of you are precious, beloved.
Yeah.
It's time for you to rest. It's time for you to listen within. Like, what a difference. It brings tears to my eyes just to think about that. Like, the difference it would have made in my own life. And fortunately, now I am on this path, but I think of the women out there and the little girls, if they have this message, what a difference it will make for them to know that they're loved and that they're precious.
Yeah. Very empowering. Yeah.
Yeah.
So which archetypes would you say would especially help empathic and sensitive souls?
Yeah, I think that, archetypes for me are amazing because they're like a renewable energy source that we can plug into at any time. And so archetypal energy are collective patterns of consciousness that are easily recognizable. So Mother Teresa as the Great Mother, or Marilyn Monroe as the Goddess of Love, you can feel into the different energies of those archetypes and how they inform you. So for me, that is really important. And I feel for empaths and sensitive people, this archetype of the Great Mother, this energy that I just read, is very important because, and so the new moon, that new moon phase would be very important to get enough rest, to get enough nourishment, because that's the gift of the mother, is to nourish. Without the mother, we cannot survive. Without the mother's nourishment, as a tiny baby, we can't survive. And so the gift of nourishing ourselves, especially as sensitive people, as empaths, to take the time during the new moon to rest and to relax. And then part of that archetype within the 13 moon lineage, in that whole idea of nourishment, there is another archetype, the priestess archetype, which I also feel is very powerful for empaths, because the priestess has the gift and tool of intuition. And intuition is like nourishment for our soul. It's how we feed our soul. And so for many of us, we weren't taught to access our intuition. And so our soul voice feels neglected and ignored and starving. And so if we can take the time to do that, then it can be so empowering. One of the tools of the priestess that I thought would be fun to share, well, her gifts are stillness and to amplify in stillness, right? So for all of the sensitive souls out there, is that quality of reclaiming stillness as a gift and not something, that we categorize as lazy or not doing anything or not, moving forward, because that's that whole solar energy again of accessing our power outside of ourselves, but instead to come within, because the priestess is like Elsa in Frozen 2. She bridges the world of this earth world and the world of the spirit. And so it's very important to really tune into ourselves, to listen to our soul voice. And one of her tools I brought here with me is the chalice. And so one beautiful way that I love to invite people to feel into when they're feeling into their intuition, because the chalice is something that can receive, just like as though I could pour water into it, right? But it also transmits. It's like a satellite, right? So in order to be that bridge, the priestess is to be a clear vessel, is to be empty of our own ego, stories, fears, and things like that. And so you can use this image of a chalice and to ask yourself, what's in my chalice right now? Is it fear? Is it sadness? Is it stress? To identify it, and then to make that choice of, okay, well, I'm going to choose to empty it, and to empty out the chalice. Because when we are empty, then we can show up for what is required in the moment, and we can actually choose what we want to put into our chalice. And so what do I choose to put into my chalice? I choose harmony and love and balance, and to feel that in our heart, and to actively work with that image of transmitting that, not just for ourselves, but for everyone. So I thought this could be a fun image for our audience to consider the chalice that they are, even to imagine their bodies, you know, their feet like the base of this chalice, and starting at the heart, right here, this to be the bowl, and going up overhead, and to ask yourself, okay, what is in my chalice? What needs to be emptied? What do I choose to put into the chalice of my temple? And to sit in stillness and to amplify that out for ourselves and for the world.
It's beautiful.
Fun, huh?
Yeah, and so simple and
So
easy.
simple,
Yeah.
right?
Your chalice is gorgeous with the goddess on it.
Oh, thank you.
Gorgeous. I like that a lot. I can even see that doing that under the moonlight, just standing with
Oh,
that
yeah.
and asking.
Yeah, I love that, Dottie. And to like even to fill it with the moonlight, right? And
Yeah.
what were you going to say in asking?
Oh, just asking for what we need to empty and what we need to fill up with.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. The moon is
Yeah.
so powerful. And she's about to be full as we do this interview. She'll be full tomorrow, and I just adore this time of the moon phase,
Yes.
all of them. But I like being able to see her and all that glory. So reassuring.
Yes. Yeah.
So well, I suppose you addressed this a little bit, but what practical steps can people take to connect to their power and the power of the moon?
Well, I think that your idea about doing this chalice practice under the moonlight is great. And that makes me think of, well, one of the most important practices that I love to do is to set and or receive an intention. And so at the new moon, so to go out into the darkness and to, empty ourselves, like I showed with the chalice, and then to ask for what is the intention, because often we set intentions and that's wonderful, like there's a feeling or something that we desire to be or to have more in our life, to set that intention for the moon cycle. But for me, one of my practices that has been so empowering is to receive an intention. And that's what I thought of when you said, to receive it into that chalice. What is the intention for this moon? And then to allow to work with that intention. I do that every moon. I always have, for me, because I'm more clairvoyant, I see symbols and I see images. So it usually comes to me as an image and I work with that image. And it's amazing what I discover, what I transmute through working with that symbol. And so that's one thing, is to set an intention with the moon and to work with it, to follow the breadcrumbs and see the magic unfold as you work with that symbol. Sometimes the symbols for me have been the craziest things, like a set of dishes. And sometimes they're deep and mystical, like a Merkaba. But it's amazing what can unfold when you begin to work with that. What I often do is for me, this moon, my intention is the fire lotus. It's a lotus with a flame in the center of it. And it is something that I've been working with for a long time. And so I have an image of it on my phone, so that every time I turn on my phone, which is a lot, I see that image and I'm reminded of that image, that somehow it's guiding me. So that's one thing. Another thing is to work with oracle cards. It's one of my favorite practices. And I pulled one for our call today. I always pull them for cards, and I got this one right here. It's the card Transmute. It's actually, this is a wonderful, they're all wonderful, but this is the card of the alchemical goddess, the 13th goddess, that sits in the middle of the moon mat. And she is the one who is able to shapeshift into any energy that is required. And this one is particularly about the peacock feather. And so I pulled the peacock feather. And what is amazing about this tool is that the peacocks are so beautiful. I mean, just look into the amazing gorgeousness of the color of this one feather, and then to imagine a whole peacock. And so there's that quality of magnificent beauty that just dares to express itself, right? And also the quality of the peacock being a creature that is able to transmute toxins through their body. They don't die from poison. And so I feel like for this call today is this knowing that we have the ability to shape shift into what's required at the moment, and we're able to transmute this knowing that we're able to transmute the toxins, because there is a lot of toxicity going on right now in our world. And to have that trust that there is a cycle, there are energies that are holding us, so that we can remember our own magnificence, our own beauty, even as we face a toxic world. So that's my little moon reading for everyone. Boom. And so, those are all ways that you can do that. And then, of course, I have a lot of different offerings that I work with people to help them access their intuition and open their hearts to receive their own mythic essence. So, and I'm happy to talk about them, or I can talk about them later.
Well, I would love for you to. I just want to say that I like what you said about asking for intentions on the new moon, because sometimes I'll sit down and I'll think, what are the logical intentions I should write down? And it doesn't feel authentic. So I love that you suggest that. I never thought about that before. And I think that's a really beautiful way to start to get in touch with our intuition too, on a deeper level, and trust what we're getting. Yeah.
Right. And I'll just share with you an example of how I work with that through the moon cycle power path. Is last moon cycle, I saw the image of a cauldron over a fire on a stick, a wooden stick, like out in the woods. And my first instinct was like, oh gosh, that cauldron seems really heavy. That water was boiling and it was on this stick. And in my mind, I'm like, I think that's a metal stick. Like, I was trying to change it because I thought the stick couldn't hold it, right? And then I was like, okay, I caught myself, and I was just like, okay, this is it. So I put it on my phone. I did that in the new moon. In the first quarter moon, I was invited to be in a medicine wheel ceremony. And during that ceremony, I sat in one of the directions. And during that time, just other things that had happened, I called in the elements, earth, air, wind, and fire. And I just had this knowing, because I saw that picture again of the cauldron. And I thought, oh, the stick isn't the only thing holding this cauldron. Why am I so focused on the stick? And the stick, of course, is the image of a masculine, right? A masculine symbol. The cauldron's feminine, right? The heavy is the cauldron of creativity. And I had just got teared up by thinking, oh my gosh, the air is holding that cauldron. The fire is holding it. The water and the earth is holding that. So my limited view was, it was just the stick. And that is so reflective of my own perception that somehow I have to, turn it into steel to get to the point to hold it all up. And so later, that was in the first quarter moon, through the goddess phase, the renewal phase, I thought, I am going to use the elements to help me hold the intentions that I have. So I'm creating a program in July. And so I created an altar that included all the elements. And so I began to manifest and make beautiful spaces, because I had received the knowing that I don't have to hold it all in here or in here. Like, I can manifest this through my connection with the elements, through my connection with all that is here to support me. And then finally, in the third quarter moon in the sage, that's the time to reflect. I did a Facebook live stream in my group to celebrate the new moon, because the third quarter moon is leading like a sage. Like, what is the wisdom? What is the harvest that you've received from the moon cycle that can benefit yourself and for your community or your family? And so I shared that with my community. Now, if I had sat down and said, let's see, what should I set as my intention for this moon cycle? I would never have come up with a cauldron on a wooden stick. And I would never have found in the unknown this knowing that I am held by more than what I can see.
I love that.
So it's amazing. It's just amazing. And we all have the power to do that. This is that interaction, this dance with our soul voice that enables this wisdom to come through for ourselves and for others.
Yeah, it's I like to think about a time when we did this just right, it was everyday life to connect to magic this way.
Yes.
And we can do it now. We just have lost that practice through.
Right. We have. And the moon cycle is one way to tap back into that magic, because it helps to break up that the way in which we have been so focused on doing and seeing what's real instead of being and just knowing what's real.
Yeah. Can you briefly tell us what the archetypes are for each moon?
Yeah, so in the moon cycle power path, it's the mother, that's the new moon, and that's her gift of nourishment, right? So we start in the new moon, and that's the time to go within and to relax and receive and to listen, to nourish through our intuition, to receive or set our intuition, our intentions. Then in the third quarter moon is the queen. It's time to reign like a queen. And so that's the time to, as even in the gestational cycle, it's the point where the seed from the new moon is beginning to sprout and to push through. And there's that point in time where the husk of the seed has to be cracked in order for the sprout to come through. Sometimes that time can feel a little bit like, is the seeds going to sprout or not? And so that's when it's important to sit on your throne, reign like a queen, and look at your whole queendom and say, okay, from this position of my own majesty, what am I going to choose to do? Where, especially this question, where are my power leaks? Where are my power leaks? And how can I plug them up? Because a queen not only is in charge of the queendom, but she also takes really good care of herself. She has a court of support, right? And so tapping into those power leaks and plugging them up so that she feels like she can sit on her throne without wobbling in her power. And her gift is power. The third one is the third quarter moon, which is the goddess, and that's the time of renewal. It's a time to renew and to connect with others, with your heart, to be in celebration. It's the time where the sprout has become the bloom, so to take in the beauty of that bloom, right, and to celebrate it. It's the time of Lammas, August 1st, the time of the first harvest. So this is the time to really connect and to renew, to beautify, to open your heart. And then the third quarter moon is the time of the final harvest. This is the time to lead like a sage, to look back over the whole moon cycle and to say, wow, this intention, what has come through, this has come through for me. What is the true harvest? The harvest can be a project that you're working on, something that you learned, some piece of wisdom that has helped yourself on your own soul purpose path, or it can be something that you share with others. And then from that sage, you receive that, you harvest it, and then you come back in. And that right there is our birthright. It is to expand, but also to contract and to come back into emptiness so that we can be and receive.
Awesome. You describe it so eloquently. Again, that's another word that just keeps coming through, but in a way that feels like I can do this and I can remember this. It doesn't have to be so overwhelming. I think sometimes when you start learning about the moon and it's like, oh my gosh, I can't remember what quarter does what, when, where,
Yes.
why, what do I do, what moon? So yeah.
Well, thank you for that reflection, because that was my intention and that was my experience when I was pipes. It can be very complex because it's deep. But then what I would see happen with women is that they would kind of get, they're faced with. And so for me, that's why it's so important to bring in the archetypes, because the archetypes are energies, like I said, they're energies that are collective energies that we can easily recognize. And so when you can feel into a mother and her love, or a queen and her majesty, or a goddess in the way that she opens her heart and she shines, or the sage, like the wise woman that leads, it's so much more easy to connect to. And so that's why I also made it just 4, because I think that is where we start, is to reclaim that path of expansion and then coming back home to rest, because that's the part I know for me. I did this also for me because it's something I struggle with, is coming back home to rest.
Yeah, it is a tough one.
Yeah.
Especially with the demands of our modern lives. So yeah, but it's good. It's good that people are talking about it, learning to honor it. And I know we talked about getting back to something, and I can't remember now, and I don't have it in my notes because I've taken so many notes. I've learned so much. It's been
Well, I
amazing.
think we were going to talk about some of the different, I know we're going to talk about my free gift.
Yes,
I think that was probably what we're going to segue into. And then some of maybe my other offerings. I think that's what we were going to talk about. So,
perfect.
yeah. So I'll just start with the free gift. So the free gift is the feminine lunar archetype quiz. And that is all about these 4 archetypes: mother, queen, goddess, and sage. So it's a real fun, like 90-second quiz that you take. And then you'll be led to a video where I share more about that. And you'll learn what are the shadows and the gifts of these archetypes, because that's the thing about archetypal energy. And then this work in alchemy of raising shadow to light. All archetypes have a shadow. And so, like, the mother can be over responsible, right? Over giving. That's a shadow of a mother. And she has her gift, which is nurturance, unconditional love. Um, so I talk about that. And then also you'll know which moon cycle would be a great place for you to focus, because if you're getting the archetype of, say, mother, then that is calling to you. It's like the voice in the moonlight. My chapter in this book is called Voices in the Moonlight. And so it's as though that voice in the moonlight is calling to you and saying, Dottie, Dottie, the mother is here. These are my gifts and shadows. And this is how you can work with them at the new moon. So that is that is my free gift. And I'd love for you to take it. And once you sign into that, you'll also come into a email sequence where I talk more about the 3 feminine fire secrets, one which is aligning with your feminine rhythm. And there's other kind of gifts in there, including a Spotify playlist for each of those archetypes, so that you can also play your own DJ Oracle during the moon phases. That's also a really fun way just to begin to have a taste of moving with the moon cycles. Like, oh, okay, which archetype are we in? Let me put on that playlist. Let me move my body to that, because the songs on the mother playlist are very different, say, from the songs on the goddess playlist, right? From the sound and the words and the rhythm. And also you can play DJ Oracle to access your intuition. So there's other goodies in that. So that is the quiz. You're also invited to come into my Facebook group, the Feminine Fire Sisterhood, where I do new moon rituals, which is a great time for you to receive your intention. And so we do a ritual in doing that. And that's something you can begin to track and follow through the moon cycle once you receive it. In July, I'm launching my new program, Moon Cycle Magic, which is all about working with your intention through the moon cycle and getting to know these archetypes on a very deep level. So that's also something that's coming up. And then if you want to do something deeper, I also offer the Moon Mat Oracle reading, which is the 13 moon map with those 13 divine feminine archetypes. And it is a reading that is geared toward whatever transition that you're going through. I tap into my intuition and channel those energies, and you receive a training on the 13 moon mat, also your own recording, and then also an activation with me. So that's a really fun way to dive deeper into the moon. And then of course I offer divine feminine coaching, which is all about connecting to these 3 flames of power, love, and wisdom, aligning with your moon rhythm, really claiming yourself as an empowered feminine leader, and having this sacred space in order to be witnessed and to show up for that, and to set fully on the path of your soul purpose. So those are some of the goodies in my goodie bag. Yeah. And I want to say to the audience, how did I come to have all these things? I didn't sit down and go, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. I listened, and it's taken me a long time to put all of this together, to get it all together. And sometimes when I listen to my soul voice, I'm like, feminine fire, I can't stand for feminine fire. I'm more of a watery kind of, chill, private person. But this voice kept saying, no, this is what you're meant to be here for. And listening to it and working through it, and the initiations, whether they be down in the valley or up on the mountaintop, they've all led me to to this moment. And this moment is really what we have. And so how wonderful for me, especially looking back over my 8 years, coming into this divine feminine mystery, to look back and say, oh, I'm so grateful. I mean, it's going to bring tears to my eyes. I'm so grateful that I listened to my soul voice. And so that's what I'd love to leave your audience with, is this invitation to listen to their soul voice, to dare to dance in the mystery and step into the unknown, because your soul knows the way, and it's a magical, mysterious, wonderful path.
Oh, Aurora, this has been so much fun. And I want to say that I think you're called to work with the fire because you do it in a really gentle, loving way. That it feels safe. It doesn't feel like it's going to burn if somebody is to work with the fire with you. I think that's it's really special, the quality that you bring.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's, it's interesting on the 13 moon mat, see, for all the audience out there, there are always these little signs and symbols, but on the mat, there are 2 archetypes: the primal goddess, which is the fire, the typical fire that I didn't really want to step into. But on her opposite pole is the goddess of compassion. And that's the fire of the triple flame in the heart. And I think that's what you're speaking to. And that's what I had to come to know, that that's the flame. But I also have the primal because it's on the other side. But that's the flame that I hold as the triple flame of power, love, and wisdom, the goddess of compassion. And so thank you for that, and just for this opportunity to be with you and to be with your audience and to share something that I'm so passionate about and I really feel can heal our world.
Well, it comes through really well. You speak just so, I don't know. I learned so much, and it went so quickly, this conversation. I had so much fun. Just flowed.
Wonderful. That's right.
Yeah. And thank you for listening to your inner voice and getting to where you are today, because I know that so many people are healing and growing as a result of what you offer. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you, everybody, for watching today. And we will see you again soon. Bye-bye.